College and today's broadcast of the North Idaho College Public Forum. The crew is comprised of North Idaho College television students. Your moderator is North Idaho College political scientist Tony Stewart.
Recently, we interviewed the basketball coach at North Idaho College in honor of his 500th victory as a college coach, which is a tremendous accomplishment. We at North Idaho College have another person that we want to honor who has an incredible record in another area of sports. Our guest today is John Owen, who is the coach of the North Idaho College wrestling team. And between his years here and those of Dr. Les Hogan, who preceded him, one would have to describe the record of the wrestling team here as rather an astounding one. For example, the teams at North Idaho College since its beginning have won 143 dual matches and only lost 6 and tied 1. With that record of 143, 6-1, only one of those losses was to a junior college. It was Columbia Basin College by a score of 20-19. It's the only loss ever at this institution to a junior college. We also have, during that period of time, 6 national championships of what we call the National Junior College Athletic Association. Of those 6 national championship teams, Coach Owen has been heading the team when 4 of those championships took place. We have also won 14 NJCAA 18 region titles. In fact, we've won 12 consecutive regional titles in coming to that 14 number. We have had on the team 60 All-American players, which is a national record. We have had 16 individual championship members of those teams. Coach Owen has been the coach as we have accumulated 37 of those All-Americans. He also, in 1986, with his national championship team, had 4 individual champions on that team nationally. As I've indicated, he has had, in addition to that, 12 individual champions. Coach Owen has been selected as the Coach of the Year nationally in 1978, 1982, and 1985. Another very impressive point, and I think is very important concerning athletics in relation to academic pursuits, of every All-American that Coach Owen has had, all of them, with the exception of one, has transferred to a 4-year college. Coach Owen, I am exhausted just giving that marvelous record that you and your teams have accumulated, and prior to you, Dr. Hogan. And I want to congratulate you in front of all of our audience and say that is a tremendous record. And I can testify to the fact that while being a successful coach, you also emphasize greatly the academic pursuits, and you are to be commended for not letting that take second place to the program. You've had a successful program without doing that. And welcome to the show.
Thank you, Tony.
I also want to welcome Steve Schenk, who is the Director of Informational Services at North Idaho College, and I shall invite him to commence the questioning with our guest today.
John, I want to add my congratulations along with Tony's. That record is truly remarkable, and even more so, I think, if a person stops and takes time to realize that that you've built that kind of a wrestling dynasty at a small school, in a small state that is a long way from the traditional wrestling powerhouses that produce lots of high school wrestlers for recruitment. I know that there are a lot of facets involved in your wrestling program, but after 11 seasons, I wonder if there's one thing in particular that you think is most important in developing the kind of successful athletic program that you've been able to do.
Well, Steve, that's a tough question. I believe that, you know, I've thought about it a great deal. The one single factor that is probably the most important, but you know, I'd like to think that was recruiting. But without the support of the institution, their willingness and desires to want to have that type of program, you cannot recruit. So I think the key, of course, as you mentioned, has been recruiting, and it's sometimes difficult at times because of our location, you know, being in Idaho and being so far removed from the mainstream of the hotbed of wrestling, which is the Midwest. It's a lot of work, but at the same time, you know, I think without the support of the institution, the community, and the board, of course, which is heavily involved in that, we would not be able to do that.
Let me follow one tough question with another one. It's the same kind of a what's the best, what's the most sort of a thing. We talked about recruiting. You look at lots of talented young athletes every year, and you've got to do that frequently with a 2-year program. You turn athletes around quickly. What do you look for most? Is it strength? Is it ability? Is it attitude?
Well, I think probably, you know, you can come up with a lot of, you know, expertise on it, and a lot of people have different ideas. I think the first thing you look for is what I've did ever since I came to North Idaho College. The first most important thing, you better look at his win-loss record. And you know, I don't know, sometimes we guess a lot and we're lucky a lot, but I've always felt if a person's 80-1 and there's somebody 80-0 that he's lost to, you better recruit that guy 80-0. Steve.
I would like to pursue the same line of questioning that Steve has been conducting. When you attempt your recruiting process, and I can testify to the fact it is very successful, give us some of the steps you go through and what works. And I hope I'm not asking you to give away any trade secrets for other coaches, but there must be certain ways that you approach bringing these individuals from all over the United States to be part of your team.
Well, first, you know, like we did this year, I think we break it down. At the end of the year, you sit down, you analyze where your needs are at, and we're at that point right now where we recognize what weight class we need somebody. And then once we recognize that we do have a need, we start looking for those individuals. The people that we actively recruit are those people that we feel, after analyzing everything there is about him, that can place in national competition. And we look at it totally like that. And if we have to, you know, we would like to start in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, with a Kevin Frame and 150-pounder. And we feel that when we get down assessing his talent, he is not capable of placing a national tournament, then the circle gets wider and wider. In the case of our heavyweight from Pennsylvania, we'd like to think that we have to go as far as we can to find that individual that can place in national competition. Obviously, the farther away you get, the more difficult it becomes, the more unknowns that there is, because we don't have the availability to visit with those people one-on-one like we'd like to prior to them.
But these same individuals are recruited heavily by other schools. What is it that, in your personality and in your communicative skills, that results in getting so many of them? Because almost all the people that you get have outstanding records and could easily go somewhere else.
Tony, I think the first reason is probably my good looks, and no question about that. The second one is probably our the second one is probably our reputation. I believe that the fact that we've had the national success that we've had over the last 5-10 years, it's made a difference as far as getting in that front door and being able to talk to an individual. I know when I started as the head coach in 1978, and I recruited 2 years for the institution prior to that, it wasn't as easy. I think that's one of the successes we've had. Also, the fact that when there is outstanding people locally, we've been able to attract those people to North Idaho College. I think there's a lot of little factors, but
you're a little bit like UCLA was in basketball. You get a reputation within the field of wrestling of winning every year the regionals and going to the nationals, and even if not winning the nationals, place second, third, fourth, or fifth. I didn't give those statistics. So I imagine you have a lot of people, parents and young people, to call you and even ask you if you're interested in them too, with that kind of record, don't you?
Well, yeah, we get a lot of phone calls, we get a lot of letters, and we get lucky a lot too, like in the case of our 190-pounder Pat Whitcomb, who enrolled in school 7 days after school started because things did not go well for him at Michigan State, and it was referral from his high school coach, and I'd coached an All-American from that young man's school previous to this. So there's a lot of luck involved, Tony. I know that any time we've had the kind of success like we've had this year, you look back on it and you've been very fortunate, you've been very lucky. You've got, and I believe when one is not successful, he works just as hard. I can remember the year 1979. It's like a bad dream where I went into the national tournament ranked, #1 in the country and came out number 20, and I can assure you that I put just as many hours in as I did in 1986.
Steve Schenk.
John, you're a very modest person, and I've come to realize that after having known you for a while. You talk a lot about luck, but some very perceptive guy once said that it's amazing how lucky you get when you work hard, and I know that's the case with you. But talking about working hard as far as athletes are concerned, I wrestled once a long time ago, and my most vivid memory of that is how physically demanding the sport is. Mm-hmm. What kind of a workout regimen do you put your athletes through?
Well, Steve, I think it goes back even a little farther now. We work real hard, but you have to have a program that makes people work hard. I think when we first started, if we asked a young man to run 13 miles, he would have joined another sport. But I think now that you know, you can eliminate people if they don't do what you ask them to do and still maintain your national success. It's a little easier for me to sit here and be real philosophical with you, but I think that brings up a good point. You know, when you get down to national tournament competition, I don't want to evade that question. I'll get right back to it. I think the top 6 kids in their weight class in the country, if you had the tournament the next weekend, whoever came up with that theory, I totally believe it, you might get 6 different results. The 6th place guy might be first. The 1st place guy might be 6th. We've taken, as Tony's been here a long time and watched all of our programs, we've taken some great wrestlers back there, and they did not place, and you come back saying why. So if you want to know how John Owen feels going into a national tournament, I do not feel secure until the trophy's in the trophy case. We work really hard. We start off our season October 1st. A lot of people don't realize the day before you get equipment, you run a half marathon, 13-mile, and it proceeds from there. And I think it takes a certain amount of dedication, just even and discipline, just to be involved in that type of thing. What I've tried to do is instruct people when they choose to come to North Idaho College that at North Idaho College you have to work very hard. You have to commit yourself totally to a wrestling program. I tell them it's 2 hours a day. Every day they're here. 5 days a week, you know, for the entire length of the school year. And I think by doing that, you eliminate some of the problems. I think once you build good work habits, those things, I have to believe, have came back to do good things for us in national competition.
I would like to pursue another line. I've had that privilege of seeing you in operation and your teams, the same as I have Coach Williams for a long time now, and I've learned a lot about how you both operate in your philosophy, and you have a lot of similarities, and you both have been very successful. But one thing that you have done, you have recruited a lot of players or members of your team, and you have teams, what I call teams A, B, and C. You have that much depth, and I've seen your second string go against the college and win against the first string. And by the way, that's very frustrating for the other team. But as you're doing this, and as you're recruiting so many members of your team, I've noticed times when you recruited someone with just almost a perfect record, and someone else who didn't have quite as good a record would come in here and would take that position away from them. So even you, I think, sometimes are surprised who comes out on the first string. Based upon that and doing that a long time, what goes into a very successful wrestler when particularly one comes in and you're a very excellent coach, and as you're dealing with them and they learn your techniques and they'll even surpass someone who has had a better record? It's a very long question, but what are the ingredients that go into making those champions?
Well, I think Steve asked that question, and I believe it's that type of person that you're describing right there is usually a very hard worker. I don't think we can ever get away from natural ability. Certainly, you know, I think we assume there's a lot there when he comes to North Idaho College in the last 4 or 5 years that the person does have a lot of natural God-given ability before he starts. And given that, then the rest of it, it involves dedication and hard work. And there's a lot of practices. And another thing, too, I think it takes a certain amount of strong interest on that individual's part to go back in and make technical changes on a daily basis that he needs to make in order to move up the steps.
And Steve was dealing with that, too. I'm trying to, I guess, go in a somewhat a little different path than his question, and that's why I ask it. Even though, and I agree in other sports, in that you have to have that talent and that ability, and you have to have the hard work you've mentioned. But sometimes you'll have two individuals where you not that they both work extremely hard, they both have a lot of talent, maybe they're in the same weight category, and still one of them, there's something happens about attitude and so forth that they wind up doing much better than the other one, even with those other two characteristics both there. Have you been able to analyze, is there a mental toughness that's beyond the physical talent and the hard work?
Well, Tony, I think in any sport, maybe we're talking about their ability to compete in an arena in front of a bunch of people. I think there's the old saying about the bullpen pitcher. He's great in the bullpen. When you bring him out in front of the crowd, he has trouble with his control. And I think sometimes we don't recognize that enough because we're an individual sport. In wrestling, that occurs a great deal. A lot of times you have people that perform very well in competition and don't perform as well in the room, and that works both ways. You can have the person strong in the room and not as strong in the arena. And I guess you can't really, if you could correct that thing, you certainly would do it, and I guess we're guessing a lot.
So there seems to be something mental that some people rise to the occasion when it really counts and others don't.
Yeah, we've seen that happen, fortunately, at North Idaho College a lot. When you particularly this year, when you have 5 people in the finals of a national tournament, and there's a lot of schools in the national tournament, and then you have 4 champions. You've had a lot of great performances, and for varied reasons. And you know, I've also had, you know, great wrestlers, and if I could control that thing, did not perform back there, and I came away disappointed. I think if I knew the answer, I would be successful all the time.
Steve Schenk.
John, I know that your entire college coaching experience has been in the junior college level. But you're a student of the sport, and you follow what's going on in other parts of the country and at other levels. What's the big difference between coaching junior college athletics and coaching at a 4-year institution?
Well, I know it. For me, what the difference is I think that I would like to believe that people at junior colleges like to be coached, and of course I like to coach. I think you can do a lot more teaching with an 18, 19-year-old. On a daily basis, in a lot of aspects. You can deal with the problems that exist, just getting through life on a daily basis, and also from a technical aspect, you get to work with that individual. I think it's easy to change them. I'd like to, and my observation has been at the 4-year level, when a person gets to be a junior or senior, you're not going to make that many changes. You don't do as much coaching, and you know, I like to teach, and I just feel here I'm able to do a lot more teaching.
While we're on the topic of junior college athletics generally, what do you see happening in junior college wrestling ranks? Are there some challenges out there right now?
For me personally?
For the sport.
In regard to what?
Well, I've heard you talk before about the fact that money's a problem everywhere in education. Right. And as money becomes tighter, in many cases, college administrations look to athletic budgets as a place to cut, and the first place they're going to cut there is in minor sports. Are you seeing the ranks of junior colleges which offer wrestling programs dwindling? And if so, what's that do to your program? What's it do to competition on a regional and national level?
Well, Steve, I think first of all, I sit home and worry about what was happening in the sport of wrestling, and I decided that as basically I can't control those type of things. If I could, I would certainly try to do that, but I'm not going to worry about things I can't control. Looking at it at a national level, numbers are dropping in all sports, not just in minor sports, I think, because of the economy in general. I think in the end, maybe wrestling might be okay from the standpoint it's never been given that kinds of monies, that when people are making budget cuts, they need to look at saving a lot of money by dropping a wrestling program. As a general rule, the most expensive thing about the program is the mat. You already have a wrestling mat, and so I think you might get by. And also, when you look at it even at the 4-year level, where you've had a number of schools dropping, the schools that seem to be surviving, believe it or not, are the Division II, Division III, NAI teams, where obviously there's not a great deal of money going into those programs, so there's no sense of cutting them. Where you've seen the cuts have came in programs that have had 10, 11 full rides and a large transportation budget, like a good example might be Louisiana State University. I also think that one of the things that have been extremely enjoyable for me that if I don't mention it now, I might not, is that when you get to the national tournament, I've always looked at it in terms there's about 20 teams that could win it. All of them have about the same types of monies, same schedules, same transportation. Things are equal. Nobody's buying a team at the national junior college level, and so it gets down to more of a pure type of competition that I really enjoy. And I like the thought of sitting down with a group of people in October and say, gentlemen, we are going to win that national title in 1986, which we did.
If I could follow up with one more question. I enjoy wrestling. I think it's an outstanding spectator sport. I know it's not always easy to pack a gymnasium with wrestling fans. I don't think there aren't as many people out there who understand the sport, and for that reason there aren't as many people out there who enjoy coming to see it. What can you do? What can you do as a coach? What can we do as a college to try to introduce more people to the sport of wrestling?
Well, I think one thing I'm convinced of is you brought up one really good point, Steve. I've never met a wrestler in my life that did not like wrestling that stuck with it very long. And I think the problem we're battling here is the fact that it's a relatively new sport. I believe wrestling started in the middle 60s in the state of Idaho and in the 5 northern counties. And I believe in the areas like Oklahoma that Iowa, they're on their 3rd generation of their granddad oftentimes is wrestlers. You see a lot more interest, and all we need is a little more time. If you look at our numbers, we're up. We have increased our attendance in the last couple of years, and I got to believe it's going to get better, and I think we need to work at that. We can never back up and say we're not getting it done, but I think as more people have children that have wrestled or have dads that have wrestled, maybe their girlfriends were involved in cheerleading, maybe a friend of theirs competed. I just think it takes time, and I think we're making some ground, making up some ground, and it's going to take a while. It's the state tournament. Obviously, hosting that in our gymnasium was a great example of exposing, 3,100 people on Saturday night to high school wrestling, and I think there's a trickle-down theory. It has to help our college. I also feel that we're getting stronger wrestling at the high school level. Coeur d'Alene High School was 4th in the state. Kellogg High School was in the top 2 or 3, along with Lakeland was 2, Kellogg was 3, Wallace was 5. You're getting stronger high school wrestling. You're bringing in more people, and that in turn is going to make North Idaho College wrestling stronger, because we're going to get more fans on account of it. Lakeland wrestling has been a great program in the last 2 or 3 years, and we're seeing some of those effects at North Idaho College because we had a lot of Lakeland fans now.
This question is one that coaches tend not to like, and we never quit asking it, though. We don't give up. When you've had as many successes as you had and so many champions as you had, it's, I know, difficult, but could you think back and tell us some moments that have been more special to you? I'm not going to ask that question of what's been your favorite team or the favorite exact moment, but just some highlights of the program that you've been here and coached this number of years.
Well, Tony, probably my first national championship was probably the most exciting, very exciting time for me, because an old story, I lost a state high school championship when I was a coach in Oregon by a 1/4 point. And I remember an old boy told me at that time, I was walking away getting my trophy, and he says, son, he says, there's an old saying, he says, when you get close, you better win them, because you don't get that many chances. And I thought about that when I was sitting in 2nd place, and we had to win a match to win the national title, and I was wondering at that time if I was always going to be a runner-up. Because I was a runner-up when I was a high school wrestler. I'd taken 2nd in the state. When I was a junior, when I should have won it, and I was undefeated at the time, and I thought, well, maybe I'm a runner-up. And that was nice to get by that first one. I think sometimes the first one is maybe the most rewarding. Even though it came in my very first year as a head coach, it has a great deal of meaning to you. Probably the most exciting moment of my life might have been in 1982 when we won the national championship on the very last bout of the evening. There was 312 matches to the 1982 national championship in junior college wrestling. At the very end, we got down to the heavyweight match. A young man by the name of Dorowski from Cuyahoga West and Darrell Peterson from North Idaho College. Whoever won that match won the national title. With 4 seconds left, it was tied. And with 2 seconds left, our heavyweight got away, and he was 300-some pounds, and it was a very exciting time. Someone asked me how I felt, in those last 4 seconds. I just wanted to walk out of the gym, go in the hallway, and throw up or get away from it all. The pressure was obviously great. The pressure had to be enormous on those 2 young men wrestling for a national title for their team, as well as an individual championship himself. But that's probably one of the most exciting moments in my life. I wish I could share that experience with everyone Obviously, athletics has been very good to me, and there's nobody that's probably had any highers, moments than I have had in the sport. I've had my low ones, but I've certainly been rewarded with a lot of great things.
All that line too, with your own experience and with so many members of your team now, it's a constant competitive process, and you instantly find victory or defeat, unlike some occupations where it's more abstract. What has that taught you, or what does that teach a young person to be in that kind of environment about other aspects of life? Does it aid you in coping with either accomplishments or disappointments outside of the field of sports?
Well, I'm convinced that the sport of wrestling is a great teacher about life, because when you make a mistake in wrestling, that's your mistake, and you're responsible for that mistake. And when you win, you're responsible for that win, and it's very easy when you have a victory or a defeat in that sport to analyze and zero in on what kinds of things might aid you to a stronger victory or to a greater position, or if I fail, what kinds of things can I do to correct the mistakes that I made to make me a better wrestler. And I believe that's what we do when we go out through life about becoming a better person. What kinds of things can I do to make myself a better person? I'd like to believe that one-on-one sports like the sport of wrestling and obviously I believe that wrestling is the greatest sport there is.
I'm reading, political science comes out in me. I'm reading from your statement that our Constitution tells us we have some very basic important rights, but along with those rights come responsibilities. So are you suggesting that in a society like ours, we do have a lot of rights, but as you go exercise those, you can do things that can create problems, and that's where the responsibility comes in. And I'm reading into what you're saying, that you really are teaching responsibility to other people.
Well, I like to believe that's what we do, Tony, because it's one of those sports. I believe we don't have a lot of physical barriers that you find in some sports. We don't have a height barrier, a speed barrier. I believe today, 1986, we can still sell people in the sport of wrestling on hard work and dedication, and you can have success. And I believe that that's what we try to tell people as far as their young lives are concerned. If you dedicate yourself and you work hard, then there's a great world out there, and there's a free enterprise system, and get in line, and you can be one of those people that are successful.
We only have 30 seconds left. I want to ask what Coach Williams was asked. Is it easier during the season when you're coaching, or is it easy for you when you're recruiting in off season?
The hardest time of my life is the national tournament.
When you're in the tournament.
Right.
With that, I have to bring our program to conclusion. I want to thank Steve Schenk, and I know he joins me in thanking you and congratulating you once again, John, for what again I have to call an extraordinary record, and we look forward to future years with you and at our college and in the sport.
Thanks, Tony.
Ladies and gentlemen, our guest has been John Owen, who is the coach of the wrestling team at North Idaho College. And as I indicated at the beginning of the program, we've had an extraordinary record of 143 wins, 6 losses, and 1 tie, and 6 national championships. And Coach Owen has headed 4 of those teams for national championship. I hope you've enjoyed this discussion, and I want to invite you to be with us again next week when we'll discuss what we believe is a very important topic. Until then, please have a good week. I am Tony Stewart.
The North Idaho College Public Forum can be seen at this same time each week over this station. This production was videotaped earlier by a North Idaho College student crew for viewing at this more appropriate time.